The first thing that tipped me off that something was wrong wasn't the noise. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't even fear. It was the fact that the security camera showed me standing in a place where I absolutely was not. I was working the overnight shift at a self-storage facility off a service road just outside a mid-sized city in the Midwest. If you've ever driven past one of those places at night, you know the kind. Long rows of metal units, tall chain link fencing, bright floodlights that make everything feel sterile and exposed. The kind of place you don't think about twice. I'd been there almost a year. The shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I worked alone. My job was simple: monitor the cameras, log license plates, do a patrol every 2 hours, and call the police if something serious happened. Most nights were dead quiet. Sometimes someone would show up late to grab something from their unit, but usually it was just me, the hum of the lights, and the occasional semi-truck passing on the highway. That night started like any other. Coffee, hoodie, radio clipped to my belt. I clocked in, nodded to the day manager, and settled into the small office near the front gate. There were 12 camera feeds, all displayed on a single monitor. I'd glanced at them 1,000 times before. Nothing ever happened. Until about 1:17 a.m. I remember the time because that's when the motion alert chimed. One soft electronic beep, barely noticeable. Camera 7, row D. I leaned forward and squinted at the screen. Camera 7 covered the far end of the property where the storage units backed up against a tree line. Hardly anyone ever went back there. The feed flickered for a second, and then I saw someone standing in the middle of the lane. At first, I thought it was a customer. Maybe someone who forgot the gate code and walked in from the side fence. That happens sometimes. But something felt off immediately. The person wasn't moving. They were standing perfectly still, unos facing the camera, hands at their sides, head tilted slightly down. I zoomed in. My stomach dropped. It was me. Same hoodie, same build, same stupid baseball cap I always wore on night shifts. Even the reflective stripe on my jacket caught the light the same way. I actually turned around in my chair, like maybe I'd somehow walked out there without realizing it. The office was empty. I was alone. I looked back at the screen. The figure lifted its head and smiled. I slammed my hand on the desk hard enough to hurt. The feed glitched, went static for half a second, and then showed an empty lane. No one there, just the rows of metal doors and the floodlights buzzing. I sat there breathing hard, telling myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection, a camera artifact, anything but what my brain wanted to believe. I laughed, but it sounded fake even to me. "Get it together," I muttered. I checked the other cameras. All normal. No alerts. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, like the night had quietly stepped sideways when I wasn't looking. Around 2 a.m., I went out for my patrol. I needed air, needed to prove to myself that everything was normal. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and stepped into the cold. The property looked the same as always. Long lanes, locked units, no movement. My footsteps echoed louder than usual, or maybe I was just jumpy. When I reached row D, the spot where I'd seen myself, I stopped. The concrete was scuffed. Fresh marks, like someone had been standing there for a long time, shifting their weight back and forth. I radioed in that everything was clear and headed back to the office faster than I meant to. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I barely slept the next day. I kept replaying the image in my head. That smile. It wasn't friendly. It was patient, like it knew something I didn't. The next shift, I told myself I wouldn't think about it. Cameras glitch. Minds play tricks. End of story. At 12:42 a.m., camera 3 triggered. Row B. I pulled up the feed. Someone was walking down the lane, dragging their hand along the metal doors, producing a slow, hollow scraping sound that somehow carried even through the screen. They stopped halfway down the row and turned toward the camera. Again, it was me. But this time, something was wrong with the face. The eyes were too dark, the smile too wide, and the way it moved, slightly delayed, like a bad video sync. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "Hey!" I shouted, even though I knew no one could hear me. On the screen, the thing raised its hand and waved. Then it leaned forward, close enough that the camera lens fogged slightly, as if it were breathing on it. The feed cut to static. Every camera blinked out at once. The room went silent, except for my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The backup system kicked in after about 10 seconds, though it felt like 10 minutes. The feeds came back, one by one, all empty. I called my supervisor. He answered groggy and annoyed. I told him the cameras had gone down. I didn't mention what I'd seen. I couldn't even bring myself to say it out loud. He told me to log it and call maintenance in the morning. I didn't sleep at all that day. By the third night, I was convinced I was losing my mind. I considered calling in sick, but I needed the money. Rent didn't care about paranoia. At 3:11 a.m., the office door handle rattled. I froze. Customers weren't allowed inside after midnight. The gate required a code, and the office was locked. The handle rattled again. Slow. Deliberate. I stood behind the desk, staring at the door. My radio crackled with static. Then my voice came through it. Not live. Recorded. Security to row D. Everything looks clear. It was my voice from the first night. The handle stopped moving. I backed away until I hit the wall. I didn't breathe. The cameras flickered. All 12 feeds showed the same image. Me, standing outside the office door, knocking, smiling. On the screen, the other me leaned closer to the camera mounted above the door and spoke, lips moving in perfect sync with the radio playback. "Open up," it said. "You forgot something." I screamed. I won't lie. Full panic, lungs burning. The power went out. Emergency lights kicked on, bathing the office in red. The knocking stopped. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, the lights returned. The cameras reset. Everything was normal again. I quit that morning. Didn't give notice, didn't explain, just handed in my badge and walked out. A week later, my supervisor called me. He sounded confused. He asked why I'd come by the facility at 2 a.m. the night after I quit. I told him I hadn't. He sent me a still image from the cameras. It was me, standing at the gate, smiling. I changed my number after that. I still check reflections sometimes, just to make sure they're keeping up. If this story creeped you out, drop a comment and let me know what you think that thing was. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the Night Shift has a lot more stories where this came from. The scariest part wasn't when I realized someone was in the building with me. It wasn't when I heard footsteps where there shouldn't have been any. It was when I picked up the radio, called dispatch like I'd done 1,000 times before, and heard my own voice answer back. I was working overnight maintenance at a regional hospital at the time. Not a big city trauma center, but not a small clinic either. Somewhere in between. 4 floors above ground, 2 below. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights it was just me and 1 security guard covering the entire building. Hospitals at night are different. Anyone who's worked one knows that. During the day, everything feels loud and busy and purposeful. At night, it's like the place exhales. Lights dim, hallways empty. Sounds carry farther than they should. Even the air feels heavier. I'd been there about 6 months, long enough to know the routine. Fix leaky sinks, reset trip breakers, unclog toilets, respond to call lights for rooms that were technically closed but still wired into the system. It was boring work, but it paid better than most night jobs. That night started slow. Too slow. Around midnight, the hospital was unusually quiet. No ER activity, no codes, no late-night pages. I remember thinking how strange it was because there was always something going on. A pump alarm, a flickering light, a call from security asking me to check a door. Nothing. At 12:38 a.m., I got my first call. Not from dispatch, from a patient room, room B2114. That wing had been closed for renovations for over a month. No patients, no staff, no reason for a call. I stared at the work phone for a few seconds, waiting for it to stop ringing. It didn't. I finally answered. "Maintenance," I said. All I heard was breathing. Slow, deep, right up against the receiver. I pulled the phone away from my ear and frowned at it like it might explain itself. Then I hung up. I told myself it was a wiring issue. Old buildings had ghosts in the system all the time. Crossed lines, electrical interference, nothing to freak out about. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same room, B2114. I answered again, already annoyed. "This wing is closed," I said. "If this is a test." Something clicked on the other end. Then a voice whispered, "You're late." My blood went cold. I hung up without saying anything and immediately radioed security. "Hey, can you confirm no one's in B-Wing 2nd floor?" I asked. Static crackled. Then dispatch answered, calm as always. "Confirmed. B-Wing is empty." I swallowed. Thanks. I tried to laugh it off. Nerves. Long shifts do weird things to your head. Still, I logged the call and decided to go check the room anyway. Protocol was protocol. I grabbed my tool bag and headed for the stairwell. The second floor was darker than usual. Motion lights flicked on one by one as I walked, casting long shadows down the hallway. The plastic sheeting blocking off the renovation area rustled softly as air moved through the vents. Room B214 was at the far end. As I approached, I noticed the call light above the door was off. I stood there for a moment listening. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Just the faint hum of the building. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room was empty, stripped down to bare walls and exposed wiring. No bed. No equipment. Just dust and the smell of old drywall. The call button panel on the wall was intact, though. I pressed it. Nothing happened. I checked the wiring. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed something on the whiteboard. Written in dry erase marker were 3 words. You found it. I didn't remember anyone being assigned to that room. Housekeeping hadn't been up here in days. I stared at the words, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Then my radio crackled. Maintenance. I jumped. It was dispatch's voice. You good up there? They asked. Yeah, I said quickly. False alarm. Heading back. Copy that. I erased the board before leaving. I don't know why. Something about leaving it there felt wrong. The rest of the shift passed quietly, but I felt like I was being watched the entire time. Every reflection in every darkened window made me tense. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Almost. The next night, it happened again. Different room, different wing, same whisper. You're late. This time, I didn't go alone. I asked security to meet me outside the room. He was a big guy, former military, carried himself like nothing bothered him. He joked the whole way there. The room was empty. No writing this time. No call light. But as we turned to leave, his radio crackled. Dispatch called his name. He answered. Then he frowned. What? He said. He looked at me. Dispatch says you never called in a work order. I shook my head. I didn't. The room called me. He laughed once, sharp and nervous. Yeah, okay. We went back downstairs. At 3:02 a.m., every phone in the maintenance office rang at once. Not different rooms. The same room. B214. Over and over. I didn't answer. Neither did security. They stopped ringing on their own. That's when dispatch went quiet. No responses. No check-ins. No radio traffic at all. I tried calling their office directly. No answer. Security tried next. Nothing. That was when the overhead speakers clicked on. Normally, those were only used for announcements or emergency codes. A voice came through them. Mine. Perfectly clear. Maintenance is delayed, it said. Please remain where you are. Security looked at me like he was about to bolt. That wasn't funny, he said. I didn't do that, I replied. The lights flickered. Somewhere above us, something heavy scraped across the floor. Then came the footsteps. Multiple sets. Running. Security drew his flashlight and backed toward the exit. We're leaving, he said. Right now. We made it 3 steps before every door in the hallway slammed shut at once. The overhead speakers crackled again. You're still late, my voice said. Security didn't wait anymore. He fired his flashlight down the hallway and ran. I followed. We reached the stairwell just as the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim and red. The footsteps stopped. The speakers went silent. We burst through the exit doors into the parking lot and didn't stop running until we hit the guard shack. Dispatch finally answered 5 minutes later, confused and irritated. They claimed they'd been on the radio the whole time. No outages, no broadcasts, no recorded announcements. The hospital system logs showed nothing. No calls from B214, no overhead messages, no errors. Security quit the next day. I stayed 1 more week. On my last night, I found the whiteboard again. Different room, same handwriting, on time next shift. I never went back. The rule was simple. If it wasn't written in the logbook, it didn't happen. That's what my supervisor told me on my first night working overnight security at a data center. Not a flashy tech campus, just a concrete block of a building sitting alone in an industrial park outside the city. No windows, no signs, no reason for anyone to be there unless they worked there. I worked the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., completely alone. The job paid well for how boring it was, which should have been my first red flag. My entire responsibility was to sit at a desk, watch cameras, do hourly patrols, and document everything in a thick, black logbook that never left the building. Every door opened, every badge scan, every unusual noise. Write it down. Most nights, the logbook stayed almost empty. This night didn't. I clocked in at 10:55 p.m., signed my name, and relieved the day guard. He barely looked at me as he grabbed his jacket. "Quiet night," he said. "Always is." He left, and the building settled into that deep, unnatural silence that only places full of machines have. The servers never stopped humming. It sounded like breathing if you listened long enough. The first few hours went exactly as expected. I watched the cameras, scrolled on my phone, did my midnight patrol. Everything was locked. No alerts, no movement. At 1:12 a.m., I heard a sound that didn't belong. A soft click. It came from somewhere behind me. I spun around, heart already racing. But the security office was empty. Just the desk, the monitors, the door behind me leading to the main corridor. I told myself it was the HVAC system cycling. I wrote nothing in the logbook. At 2 a.m., I did another patrol. Still nothing. The building felt colder than usual, but data centers always ran cold. When I got back to the office, I noticed the logbook wasn't where I'd left it. I always kept it open to the current page, pen resting across the middle. Now it was closed and pushed a few inches to the left. I stared at it for a moment, trying to remember if I'd moved it. I shrugged it off and sat down. That's when I saw the new entry. Written neatly in block letters was a line I knew I hadn't written. Wondered 12 a.m. Audible click heard in security office. Source unknown. My mouth went dry. I flipped back through the pages. My handwriting was messy, rushed. This writing was careful, almost practiced. I checked the cameras. No one had entered the building. No badge scans. No door alerts. I picked up the radio and did a routine check-in with dispatch. Everything was normal. I convinced myself I must have written it without remembering. Night shifts mess with your head. At 2:47 a.m., another sound echoed through the building. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the main corridor. I froze, listening. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. I watched the hallway camera, empty. The footsteps stopped directly outside the office door. I held my breath. The handle didn't move. No knock. Just silence. After about 30 seconds, the sound faded away, moving deeper into the building. I waited a full minute before standing up. The logbook caught my eye. Another line had been added. 2:47 a.m. Footsteps heard outside security office. No visual confirmation on cameras. I hadn't moved. I hadn't touched the book. My hands started shaking. I radioed dispatch again, told them I might have an intruder, but the cameras weren't showing anything. They told me to do a patrol and call back if I found something. I didn't want to leave the office, but policy was policy. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The building felt different now. The hum of the servers sounded louder, uneven, like it was rising and falling. My footsteps echoed too much, like the space was bigger than it should have been. I checked every room on my route. Locked, empty. Normal. When I returned to the office, my chair was pulled out. I never leave it that way. The logbook was open again. Another entry. 3:06 a.m. Guard returned from patrol. Appears unsettled. That's when panic set in. I slammed the book shut and backed away from the desk. "Nope," I said out loud, my voice echoing in the small room. "Absolutely not." I checked the cameras again. Still nothing. No movement anywhere in the building. I called my supervisor. Straight to voicemail. At 3:22 a.m., the lights flickered, just once. Then everything went back to normal, except the logbook. 3:22 a.m., lighting fluctuation observed. Guard is aware. I didn't write that. I sat on the floor against the wall, staring at the book from a distance like it might move on its own. The next entry appeared while I was watching. I swear to this day, I watched the pen roll slightly, like it had been nudged, and new words slowly filled the line. 3:24 a.m. Guard is now watching the logbook. This is not helping. I screamed. I bolted for the door and yanked it open, ready to run outside and sit in my car until morning. The hallway beyond the door wasn't the hallway I knew. It was longer. The lights were dimmer. The walls seemed to stretch away into darkness, bending slightly, like I was looking down a tunnel. I slammed the door shut and locked it. The radio crackled. "Log everything," a voice said. It wasn't dispatch. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The voice sounded like it was coming from inside my head. The logbook flipped open on its own. The final entry of the night began writing itself. 3:31 a.m. Guard attempted to leave a signed post. This is not permitted. I curled up in the corner and waited for sunrise, counting my breaths, afraid to look away. Nothing else happened for hours. At exactly 7 a.m., the building felt normal again. The hallway looked right. The lights were bright. The hum was steady. The day guard arrived. I didn't tell him anything. I just signed out and left. Later that day, curiosity got the better of me. I drove back to the building and asked my supervisor if I could see the logbook from the night before. He frowned and pulled it from the safe. The pages were blank. No entries past midnight. No handwriting but mine. He looked at me like I was testing him. I quit the same day. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared instead. It was my voice. Calm, neutral, reading timestamps. The cleaning crew that only worked at night. I took the night janitor job because I needed money fast, not because I wanted it. It was at a mid-sized medical office building in a quiet suburb. Not a hospital, no emergency room, no overnight patients, just doctors' offices, labs, and administrative floors. The kind of place that should have been completely empty after 8 p.m. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I was told something very specific during orientation. "You'll be alone," the manager said. "No security, no other cleaners. If you hear noises, it's the building settling. If you see lights, they're on timers. Don't wander into closed offices. Just clean what's on your list." That last part stuck with me. Don't wander. My first few nights were boring in the way night shifts usually are. Vacuum carpets, empty trash, wiped down desks that still smelled faintly like coffee and hand sanitizer. The building had that sterile medical smell mixed with old carpet and dust. By the fourth night, I started noticing things that didn't quite line up. The trash cans were heavier than they should have been. Not overflowing, just heavy, like someone had filled them with wet material instead of paper. When I emptied them into my cart, I'd hear a soft thud, not a rustle. I told myself it was cleaning wipes or lab waste. On the fifth night, I noticed footsteps. Not behind me, ahead of me. I'd be pushing my cart down a hallway, and I'd hear slow steps around the corner. By the time I reached it, the hallway would be empty. This happened 3 times in one night. I asked my manager about it the next morning. "There's no one else scheduled overnight," he said without hesitation. "Just you." The 6th night was when I saw the lights. I was on the 3rd floor, cleaning exam rooms, when I noticed a glow coming from the end of the hallway. One office door was slightly open, warm yellow light spilling out. That shouldn't have been possible. All offices were locked after hours. I didn't have keys for individual rooms. I approached slowly, my cart rattling too loudly in the silence. As I got closer, I heard voices, low, muffled, like people talking quietly in the next room. I stopped inches from the door. The voices stopped too. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the crack of light. Then the light shut off. The door was closed. I tried the handle. Locked. I backed away and wrote it off as stress, lack of sleep, night shift paranoia. The next night, the smell changed. Underneath the usual cleaning chemicals, there was something sour, metallic, almost sweet, like old blood. I noticed it strongest near the elevators. I checked the trash bins there. They were heavy again. Too heavy. On the 8th night, I heard the elevator ding. I was on the 2nd floor when I heard it come from the 1st. Elevators weren't supposed to run at night. They were programmed to stay parked unless security used them. I leaned over the railing and looked down. The elevator doors were open. The car was empty. Then I saw something move inside. Not a person. More like a shadow shifting where the light didn't quite reach. The doors slid shut on their own. I didn't clean the 1st floor that night. I stayed upstairs until morning. On the 9th night, someone spoke to me. I was vacuuming a hallway when I heard a calm voice behind me. "You missed a spot." I turned around so fast, I almost fell. The hallway was empty. I laughed nervously and said, "Very funny," assuming it was someone messing with me. No response. When I looked down, there was a dark stain on the carpet near the wall. I hadn't seen it before. It didn't look like coffee or dirt. It soaked deep into the fibers, almost black in the center. I tried to clean it. It didn't come out. On the 10th night, I found the room. It wasn't on my cleaning list. The door was at the end of a hallway I'd walked past every night, but I'd never noticed it before. No number, no label, just a plain door, slightly ajar. Light leaked from underneath. I stood there for a long time, remembering what my manager said. Don't wander. But something pulled at me. The same feeling you get when you know something's wrong but can't explain why. I pushed the door open. Inside was a break room. At least it looked like one at first. Tables, chairs, a counter with a sink. But the walls were lined with trash bags. Dozens of them, stacked neatly. Some were torn at the corners, dark stains leaking through. The smell hit me like a wall. Rot, metal, cleaning chemicals trying and failing to cover it up. I backed out and closed the door quietly. I didn't report it. I should have. On the 11th night, the footsteps came back. This time, they followed me. Slow, deliberate, always just out of sight. I started talking to myself to stay calm, counting tasks, narrating what I was doing like it was a normal day. That's when I noticed the reflection. I was cleaning a glass office wall when I saw movement behind me. Not in the hallway, in the reflection. Figures, 3 of them, standing close together. They wore identical gray uniforms, janitor uniforms. Their faces were wrong, too pale, too still. Like mannequins made of skin, they didn't move when I turned around. Because they weren't there. The reflection was empty. I dropped my rag and ran to the elevator. The button didn't light up. The screen flickered, then displayed a floor number that didn't exist. B2. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Inside were trash bags, filled to the ceiling. One of them twitched. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the security desk near the front entrance. I'd never used it before. No one was ever there. But this time, someone was sitting behind it. A man in a gray janitor uniform. He looked up at me and smiled. "You're early," he said. "I don't work here," I said, backing away. "Yes, you do," he replied calmly. "You just haven't stayed long enough yet." I saw the logbook on the desk. It was thick, old. I flipped it open. Every page was filled with names, dates, shifts that never ended. My name was already written on the next line. The lights went out. When they came back on, I was alone. The building was quiet again, normal. Morning came. I never went back. A month later, I saw a job posting online. Overnight cleaning staff needed. Immediate start. Same building, same hours, same warning at the end. Must be comfortable working alone.